And Dr. Cassil. So if you want to introduce yourself for the record, and then I'll ask Councilmember Ford to speak.
Aloha, council members. My name's Joe Cassil. I'm a naturopathic physician and a licensed acupuncturist. I've been in healthcare since 1979, and I have a general natural medical practice. I see people with all kinds of conditions, and in some ways I think the general public's reliance on a doctor's clinical experience has its limitations. I could refer to people who have this or that disease with no wonderful explanation. But I worked my way through naturopathic school for the nutrition professor, and I got a lot out of that. Nutrition is one of the primary focuses of my practice. But I also learned in detail, because my job for him, this was pre-computer age, was to go to the large medical libraries and find anything I thought he would be of interest in the periodicals. So I learned how to read scientific research, and I can tell good research from bad research. So my clinical experience suggests certain things, but I think that has its limitations. But there is no limitation to the information that we have in the scientific literature from objective scientists showing the influence of GMOs and their partners, such as glyphosate, Roundup, the use of which has increased 65 times in the past 20 years. They go hand in hand. The experts have you've had a wonderful array of experts, I have to say, and they've really presented you with the information that you need objectively. And it is, honestly, I have to say that the scientific researchers who have reported their objective findings have, as far as I know from all my literature searches, shown unequivocally that GMOs and glyphosate are toxic and have numerous impacts on virtually all the organ systems in the animals and humans that eat them. That being said, we have to wonder, what's going on here? Where is the question? What are we questioning here? And it's all follow the money. When you have the scientists in the FDA raising questions and the bureaucrats deciding to do something else, follow the money. And when you look at the standards that were set by Michael Taylor, and you see that he retired to become a vice president of Monsanto after working at the FDA, there's your answer. When you have the one objective and candid former head of the USDA, Dan Glickman, who says that he felt enormous pressure to streamline the approval of GMOs, there's your answer. When you see researchers with 35 years of preeminent research losing their job after they report their findings of the toxicity of GMOs, there's your answer. So I ask each of you to search your hearts and answer for me, why is there a question on the table here? That's my introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to ask a question. You are
correct.
Okay. In your practice of X number of years, whatever that is, what diseases are showing dramatic increases? Okay.
So I'm going to share with you one that is generally not assessed by most physicians, and that is a condition known as dysbiosis. And I believe that a number of physicians that might not ring a bell for them, but it has to do with imbalance of flora in the human gut. Now, if you count how many cells are in a human body, you will find that there are more cells that aren't us than are us, if you follow my drift. So I used to historically, I looked at antibiotic exposure, exposure to corticosteroids, pregnancies, sugar consumption, things like that. Well, lo and behold, Roundup, glyphosate, is not just an herbicide. It is a biocide. And one of your early experts mentioned a biochemical pathway which exists in plants and does not exist in humans. That pathway, and it was then inferred, if not stated, that therefore Roundup was not harmful to humans. However, every bacteria in your gut relies upon that same biochemical pathway as plants.
Doctor, may I interrupt for just
Yes.
a second? Is that pathway the shikimate pathway?
There you go. I didn't want to say it. I wanted
Okay.
to allow you to mispronounce it. Yes.
Okay, well, I did then.
Yes, that pathway.
Thank you.
So it turns out that the healthy flora, the ones we want to live in our gut, are more vulnerable than pathogenic flora. And so the increased use, in fact, glyphosate is now sprayed as a ripening agent right before harvest. So, Monsanto made a lot of money misrepresenting it as biodegradable. It's anything but biodegradable. But now they're spraying it more frequently in higher concentrations and even immediately before harvest. So people's exposure to glyphosate is increasing. As I said, 65-fold increase in 20 years. So it's well documented in herd animals fed GMO foods that there is a phenomenon known as chronic botulism. And, unfortunately, you didn't get the soil scientists you wanted, but if you listen to the hearings in Kauai, Dr. Huber, who is a professor emeritus from Purdue, does a very good job of describing the repercussions of the uses of GMO and their partner Roundup. And he talks about chronic botulism in dairy herds. He talks about Austria not allowing the GMO feed, not having a problem with chronic botulism in the dairy herd. So this is an overgrowth of Clostridium botulinum because the natural flora in the gut of the herds can no longer inhibit the pathogen. The only time we see this in humans is in babies who don't have a natural flora who are then exposed to Clostridium botulinum. Well, now we're seeing it in farmers who are exposed to ever-increasing amounts of the Clostridium botulinum in their herds. So anyway, I see dysbiosis in my patients, not infrequently, as a contributory factor to many other presenting complaints, and I now have to look at GMO and glyphosate as a contributing factor to that phenomenon.
Thank you, Doctor. I'm going to yield and allow other people to ask questions.
Do you have any questions? Councilmember Willie?
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. My understanding is that part of the problem with the Roundup or whatever is applied harms the trace minerals in the soil, and it's those trace minerals such as magnesium that are help prevent or help us deal with precursors to diabetes or inflammation and sort of the long-term chronic diseases, rather than, say, causing some acute illness. And I just wonder if you've pursued any of that, or if that goes along with the children being more vulnerable, and how the whole idea of losing those trace minerals in our normal diet when we're eating heavily more GMO foods, and what the impact on the health is.
That's a great question. We have seen a trend By the way, I noticed early in one of the proposals or letters that were before the council, the term traditional/conventional, and I'd like to point out that those are in fact very different. The tradition of agriculture goes back 15,000 years, but the practices of conventional agriculture are relatively new. I don't think you could trace them back more than a couple hundred years. In reference to that, we've seen a consistent trend of declining micronutrients in the food with the introduction of conventional agriculture and the standard NPK fertilization process, as opposed to more diverse soil amendments that have a wide variety of minerals in them. So that was a pre-existing trend. However, glyphosate, and remember, glyphosate goes hand in hand with GMO for the vast majority of GMO plantings. Glyphosate was originally patented as a chelator before Monsanto even got their hands on it. Now, a chelator binds minerals. That's what they do. So glyphosate is making the minerals less available to the plants. And if you look at the nutrient profile of GMO plants, they are in fact deficient in a variety of minerals, some of which they've looked at and found none. Don't quote me on it, but I believe it is manganese. And Dr. Huber, Professor Emeritus from Purdue, could answer that question exactly, since that is his field of expertise.
Okay. Yeah, that was what I heard in terms of is it manganese? The other thing is just in terms of antibiotics. I know that GMO genes aren't an antibiotic, but my understanding is that some of those are used as markers. And so just in terms of the overall impact, looking at us, how can we minimize our use of excess antibiotics where we don't even know that that's what we're doing? And anyway, if you have any comments on that, that's one of my concerns, not just switching using a lizard gene or a human gene or something else gene, but in terms of these markers or promoters, that it's a much more complex and somewhat unknown science in that area.
Yes. The field of genetics is, in fact, in its infancy, and that this bold manipulation is already occurring on a massive scale is rather frightening. But that marker, my understanding that marker that you're talking about is actually an antibiotic resistance, and the concern is that because, as Dr. Huber has stated, these genetically modified materials are very promiscuous, and what he's saying by that is they get around, and it is documented that they have been transferred to gut flora. So if, for example, this antibiotic-resistant trait is transferred to pathogenic organisms in the human gut, then you have one more problem with antibiotic resistance, which is, of course, one of the greatest challenges facing conventional medicine today, MRSA being one small example.
Okay. And lastly, just on nutrition, I know there's been a point made that many think that GMO papaya, there's not much difference in the two nutritionally, but my readings, and I just wonder in terms of yours, is that there is often and I don't have my list of what vegetables it is, so I remember cauliflower, really far less nutritious than the GMO corresponding vegetable or crop. And I don't know if you have any input on that.
As I said, most of the GMO crops are using Roundup, and so that is going to lead to mineral deficiencies, but not all proteins are created equally. And so as we disrupt the normal genetic material of any organism, there are repercussions that we don't always plan on. And Mr. Smith referred earlier to the particular viral proteins that are generated in the rainbow papaya. And as I said, not all proteins are the same. One person can react to one protein and someone else cannot, and that is a significant issue. There are more allergenic proteins in GMO soy, for example, that people can react to that they wouldn't have any idea because they didn't traditionally have a soy allergy, but this is a protein that is now new to soybeans, and so they could be unfortunately surprised. The extreme example of such a reaction would be an anaphylactic reaction, and as you know, that can sometimes be so severe that someone opens, that's why they quit putting peanuts on air flights, because someone eating it at one end of the plane could result in anaphylaxis for someone at the other end of the plane. So we're stepping into an unknown territory that could easily bite us.
Okay, lastly, so you support Bill 113 and sort of halt and discuss questions later?
Are you asking me?
Yes, I am.
I absolutely support Bill 113. I would like to end with a little lighter note. This is from Bill Maher, the social commentary. He said, Syrian President Assad crossed the red line. He used chemical weapons. Using harmful chemicals to hurt your own people. Who does he think he is? Monsanto?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So,
Not in a laughing mood.
thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Ford?
Thank you.